Welcome to Beyond the Box. I'm Kyra Vandenberg, and I'm joined by my co-host, Nicole Elam.
And today we're exploring the technologies that are shaping landside logistics, what's here now, what's coming next, and how these innovations will transform the way that goods move on the ground.
Joining us are two experts from McKinsey & Company who bring deep insights into this space. First, we'd like to welcome Sal Arora, Senior Partner and Global Co-Leader of the Travel, Logistics, and Infrastructure Practice. Welcome, Sal.
Thank you so much for having us. We're excited to be here.
And alongside him is Kamil. He's an expert associate partner at McKinsey, and it's really great to have you here, Ali.
Good to be here as well.
Sal, we'll start with you. Can you give us an overview of the new technologies that are currently being used in landside logistics?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Maybe before I answer the specific question, I think it's always worth setting the stage. And I think people intuitively recognize this, but maybe don't recognize the extent of sort of how challenging landside logistics really are, right? And how technology can really play a role. I'm going to give credit to Ali on this one. He came up with this term called blind handoffs, which basically means think about all the different parts of a supply chain. And of course, you have different modes, which you all know very well. But even within the land side part of it, there are so many different moves that happen. And there are so many different providers that play integral roles, right? Whether you're a carrier on the trucking side, your local the warehouse operator, someone operates the yard, right? Then someone operates the outbound side. And there's lots of different pieces that have to come together. And just to give you a sense, one port might have 35,000 daily truck gate moves, right? So you think of the complexity when you have all these different moving pieces. And so I think this is a bit of what you're solving for with the use of technology and landside logistics. It is a very complex, full of blind handoffs, lots of different providers, all trying to do the best they can, frankly, with very limited connectivity and transparency on the entire value chain. They all know their own pieces, but very rarely anyone knows the entire end-to-end piece, and it's very hard to optimize end-to-end. So that's the challenge. So I think areas where we're already seeing good traction over the last 5-10 years is areas like telematics for drivers, safety telematics, operational telematics, right, giving guidance to drivers in cabs. There's a lot more technology on routing and dispatch of trucks and assets. There's a lot more technology in terms of matching loads to drivers, if you think about an asset-light context, right? So these technologies are quite mature, well proven, and actually have driven in the landside logistics sector everything from 10 to 20% productivity, much better safety, better on-time performance. Now, I will say, even these, you might call them today more basic technologies, had not come without pain. The biggest sort of barrier, but also opportunity to think about when you think about implementation of technology, especially in logistics, is frankly the human element of this, right? It is incredibly hard to change how folks who have driven trucks for 30, 40, 50 years can change their behaviors. When we went from manual trucks to automatic trucks from a transmission perspective, it was incredibly challenging for the industry, right? Even something that basic. So now imagine you're asking truck drivers and routing people and mechanics to say, you have all this data, you have all this technology, you have all this sensor material. How do you make decisions very differently? I think that challenge is being sort of underbaked to some extent. And that'll be the hardest part to get right as we think about really accelerating the use of technology. Ali, I'll open it to you for any input as well.
No, that's exactly right. I think what we have, we hear a lot about the pace of innovation and technology in our industry, but landside, as Ali mentioned, this is very inherently complex and very manual. There are these, as the work that we did around handoffs, from port terminals to getting the containers on the yards, from yards to the trucks, and then the trucks who take it to the middle mile to the warehouse where it's unloaded manually, and then another set of carriers who take it to the last mile and eventually to our door. I think every step is highly manual and requires coordination between multiple parties, not just a single one. That's why they spend intense amount of investment has gone in to automate every element, but the handoff is still like very highly manual. So I think to back to your question earlier, we see like orchestration workflows that are emerging to help operators to get the goods from one handler to another. I think as Al mentioned, the telematics capabilities, they have evolved to now being the more driver coaching tools. So we see that a lot as well. So you see technologies impacting the different element within that, but not the handoff aspect. So that still highly remains manual. And I think the human element is still going to be there for several years and like level 4 autonomy, which is many decades away. For now.
And Ali, building on that, what are some of the emerging technology trends that you're seeing in landside logistics, and how do you expect this to evolve over the next decade, as you were kind of alluding to just now?
Yeah, I think everyone's right now there is the 2-letter word everyone talks about, the AI being coming in and impact, which is indeed true, and I think it's very exciting that we see like agentic AI being the next form after generative AI came out in late 22. So I feel the next decade we'll see their investment plus the human plus agentic AI handoff, and what's the operating model. The human machine interaction is what I believe is going to emerge, which are being disrupted. So I think, as I mentioned, the single element, like we see operators or talking about predictive, and that's a very specific operation within a warehouse or within about to say where, when do I expect ship and what are the disruptions potentially that could happen. Other aspect we see is like, I think I mentioned the digital control tower, AI-driven control towers tracking shipments. Like as shipments are shipped from overseas, from Asia, potentially coming to the ports and eventually a middle mile to the warehouses. Like where are they in the process of providing like the view, but also AI-driven exception handling. That if there is a disruption, classification or a compliance document, I can do that as well. And then and I think just finally building on, I would love to get Sal's input as well, that there are players who are very with highly manual processes that were involved, which have human labor, and that's where the handoff and the coordination happens. It will take time for them to uptake some of these advanced technologies, as opposed to there are asset light players that we see in landside logistics, like the truck brokerage, which are inherently they're not that they don't have labor, they're not capital intensive. That's where I think I see automation happening. There are automatic negotiation, automatic like contract compliance as well. But love to hear your thoughts as well, so.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add 2 things. I think building on Ali's last point, I think what you're starting to see is a bit of a dichotomy between landside logistics players, right? The asset-light players that Ali mentioned. Frankly, if you go and visit some of these players and you don't see what the name inside the building is, you might think it's a tech company. They're spending billions, hundreds of millions on technology. They have coders, they have developers, they have architects, they have data scientists, because they really feel that their competitor differentiation now comes from technology. So they are leading in the landside area for sure. I think as Ali mentioned, more asset heavy carriers, but even warehouse operators are pushing a lot of automation and warehouse automation and digital twins of the warehouse to better simulate different flows. But again, they have more volatility in their operations, which they have to model the digital twin. I think the asset light players in some degrees can really accelerate, and they have. So that's one thought. I think the other thought in general, I would say in logistics, is a lot of logistics companies are experimenting with AI, right? Everyone is doing experiments all over the place because there's so much hype and there's benefit, but the benefit is being experienced in pockets, right? I might do a pilot here to improve, predictive maintenance for my truck here, or I might improve labor staffing over there. I think the challenge people are really seeing is how do you scale the power of AI? And especially in logistics, because it's so distributed, it makes it even more challenging, right? Because now you have all these different parts of the value chain that have to come together, to Ali's point. You have different human beings at different parts of the value chain that have to interact very differently. And so it makes it very hard to scale technology. And so this is why I think our hypothesis is picking one or two, and we call them domains, right? For us, a domain is like a business problem to solve. A domain could be, I want to improve the reliability of my trucks. That's a domain. That's a business problem to solve. And we would say applying AI and, both traditional predictive AI, Gen AI, and agentic AI, but along with fixing the process as well. You can't just apply technology and say, "No, I'm done." That never works. I think that's definitive. I think you also have to upskill people. Back to the point on people, you have to change the technology fits into their processes, and and we call this rewire. You have to rewire that process, and process, people, technology, data, talent, and so on. That's the only way we'll really get value out of it. Otherwise, it's a good experiment, and we can all be happy with the experiment, but it won't drive business value. And so I think logistics companies are still in the early stage of that journey. I think they're still experimenting and still trying to figure out what does AI thing actually mean. But I think there's a real question on how do you go from experimentation to scaling through business value.
And Sal, staying with you, I mean, you just mentioned that so many logistics companies are investing in technology and there's a lot of expectations around what it can deliver. But what can it realistically deliver if the infrastructure that we use to transport goods every day is still underdeveloped in so many areas?
Look, I think the short answer is we think there is still tremendous benefit, right? Because even within each part of the value chain, each individual silo, as Ali said, there is a benefit to be had. We will never get to the full potential of the value unless we get the end-to-end, right? But that is the holy grail. In logistics, the holy grail is I have end-to-end visibility. I can see exactly where my cargo is. I know exactly where the different players are, and I can optimize it seamlessly, right? And that is still a ways out. But there's lots of value, I think, in the sort of optimizing at each different point of the value chain. I mentioned, the safety telematics companies are on safety, right? And you can use traditional AI to route trucks much better and have more density on your routes. You can have better warehouse automation, right? And make sure that people are actually doing more productive tasks and tasks that are better for their physical safety as well, not carrying big boxes around. So there's lots of value there. And frankly, I think one other important piece to recognize here is that we actually feel technology and AI applied in the right way can unleash people to do what they're best at, which is solving and engaging. Right? I think the power of AI is you take a lot of the administrative, bureaucratic, non-value added, so to speak, work and put that through technology. And human beings can focus in on the, talking to customers and more the human element of engaging with each other, which I think is the unlock. On your point on infrastructure, Ali and I thought about this in two ways. There's, of course, physical infrastructure being, roads and bridges and rail tracks. And of course, we have to continue to invest in infrastructure there because to some degree, you have to have technology being enabled through the infrastructure, right? Like when you get to autonomy in trucking, you have to have LiDAR detection. LiDAR detection relies on very precise mathematics on how the road is structured and what the markers are and where your hazards are. I think the other infrastructure that we haven't talked about, and actually is sometimes a detractor for logistics companies, is actually their technology infrastructure, right? A lot of logistics companies traditionally, I'm generalizing here, have grown up by doing acquisitions, right? They acquire small companies, they roll them up, they create a network. The problem is they often don't integrate the technology, so the architecture behind it, right? They sort of patch things together in the spirit of keeping things moving. And what ends up happening is now with AI, the magic of AI comes when you have data from different parts of the organization harnessed together, stitched together to drive insights. And if you have different interfaces, different platforms, different architectural standards, it's very hard to cobble those together. So I actually think one real challenge that we as a sector will have to figure out is how do we reduce our tech debt and how do we actually create a more seamless set of infrastructure on the technology side? Otherwise, we'll never get any semblance of the full potential from a technology infrastructure perspective.
Ali, let's talk about costs. How do these new technologies impact ongoing operational expenses? And do you have any examples that have proven to be cost effective in the long run?
Logistics companies have invested in technologies and they have borne fruit over many, many years. I think we discussed telematics as we earlier, which was, I think, became mandatory. The ELD devices in the industry became mandatory in like 2010s early. And they have had tremendous impact in improving driver safety, improving the vehicle telemetry, and then roadside assistance as well. So I think we see that that those type of technologies. Similarly, I think we have had route optimization tools that have, and this happened around when we saw Uber and Lyft picking up like early 2010s. Logistics companies wanted to have this, provide the same level of experience for their customers, and we see that a lot of the customers now want to see where is my package or where it's, and they want to see the driver moving towards them, or at least know the ETA. So that has time, and then the end-to-end visibility tools as well. So there are examples in the industry that have that investments were made early, sometimes hardware and software, and like route optimization, have had tremendous impact, and not just in improving driver experience and driver safety, but also for improving the cost of operation. Like when you have route optimization tools that cut the mileage and all. Now, looking ahead, I think some of the new technologies that everyone talk about AI and generative AI these days, and what are the operators doing about it. There are tons of pilots happening, but only a fraction of them have actually really generating value. I realize that it's also for the industry, but the investment is going in, but we haven't realized the benefit just yet. So I think that's where I visit and look at how are we thinking about investments in this area. I'd love to get, Sal, your perspective. We work with our clients and bringing this Rewired framework, which is helping understand from a business lens rather than from pure technological lens. And I'll pass it to Sal to describe a little bit of what we've talked about as Rewired.
Look, at the end of the day, the simple fact is, and we have done a lot of analytical research around this, so we have conviction in this. And this is a cross-sector statement, is a logistics statement. If you look at technology and you look at all the foundational enablers around it, whether it's data, architecture, talent, operating model, ways of working. Frankly, if you look at companies that have actually gotten value out of AI scientifically, they all end up spending, often 2x the amount of money and focus on the enablers than the actual technology. So what ends up happening for most of us is we say, hey, I've got a shiny object here and I can run use application and fix this problem. Again, what we don't think about is, can it scale because we don't have data systems that are aligned? Or will it scale because it's going to change someone's job and they just won't, adopt whatever we're coming up with? I have had multiple times when we build great technology, and frankly, the front line just doesn't buy into it because it makes their life harder. They have perceptions of job security challenges. There's lots of reasons why, right? It's different. Change is difficult for all human beings. And so what ends up happening is you have this great technology that's being developed that, frankly, in theory, can deliver incredible results, but in practicality, delivers a fraction of those results, is all he was saying, because we haven't addressed all the different elements. So that from a McKinsey perspective, we call this the Rewired Framework. Right? You have to start with the business problems on the top. I think that the other part of this, the business problems, is no one should use technology for technology's sake, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes people do. Sometimes say, oh, someone's telling me to become more digital. I'll put sensors in places and I can say I'm more digital. That adds no value, of course. But people do it, surprise you. So you have to have a sense of what business value as the layer on the top, and then sort of all the enablers on data, tech stack, talent, operating model, and then the change management and adoption. And all those elements have to work seamlessly together. And if you're missing one of those elements, you will not be able to scale and actually drive business value. And that's when I think the human element really comes into, which I think is really, really important. We cannot underscore that enough. I think there's one thing you take away today is technology has lots of potential and has delivered a lot already, and it will continue to. But the single biggest thing that will get in the way of companies in landside logistics driving the value they want is not engaging the workforce the right way.
Mm-hmm. And if we dive a little bit deeper into that, can you also explain how technology might enhance the workforce? So not only that they need to implement it to get the benefits of the technology, but how can technology make their lives, their safety, or their jobs easier or better?
Yeah, I think you said a very important word, which is how do we make people's lives easier and what are the benefits for them, right? That has to be the frame, because at the end of the day, why do we implement technology? It has to make our lives easier, right? In the most generic sense. And I think there's a few ways to do this. One, I think, is whatever process you're quote unquote digitizing or adding AI to, right? I'll give you one example. Let's say my business problem to solve is I want to make have a reliable trucks. And I want to have predictive maintenance and sensor data that tells me when there is going to be breakdown so I can predict them before time. Okay. That's great. The models and algorithms can be built for sure. But you have to build the models and algorithm and the interfaces with the knowledge of what's the process of a technician. When will they need this data? How will they use it in their flows? When they're in the maintenance shop, with grease all over their clothes, how will they leverage this technology? Oftentimes, that's an afterthought. Oftentimes, we create the technology and we're really proud of ourselves. And now we say, okay, now let's focus on change management. And that, right, it has to be developed with the user, which is a really important point. You have to get them in the flow early and say, okay, tell me how this changes your workflow and how can I make your life easier at different elements of the workflow, right? That's number one. Number two, and Ali mentioned this earlier, I think this notion of human to agent interactions will become really important because you will have time in the AI world. Let's say I'm a salesperson for a asset light company, trucking company, and I'm reaching out to potential customers. I might be emailing them. Frankly, I might not even know, but their agents replying back to me because they will have agents will be replying back saying, "Here's my profile. Here's what I need," because they're automating on their end too. So to some extent, you have automation happening on both ends, right? On the provider's end and on the shipper's end. And then there's interfaces between, when will that be handed over from a technology solution to a human being on either side?
Yeah.
Right. So you have all these really weird human agent, right? Agent to agent, human to agent type forces, which is all brand new. We've never really thought about the challenges that it causes. So I think this operating model between humans and agents, this notion of making sure we're designing things with the end user in mind, making their lives easier, better, safer. I think it's very important. And I think if they see the benefit that it gives to them in their day-to-day jobs, and they've been involved in the process to design the technology and give input in the technology, this is why we really believe in agile squads, agile scrums, right? Basically, you have to have the people who are the recipients and the users working with technology to develop it. Right? The old school version of I have the tech team sitting in this, dark room over here coding, and I have the users over here. It doesn't work. I think it's been proven. Right? They have to engage. They have to work together in agile squads. They have to produce iteratively. And if they do that, then whatever the technology is being produced actually matches what the user actually wants and actually will use the workflow. And that makes a massive, massive difference.
And Ali, it'd be great to get your input on this as well. Do you see this happening? Do you see that companies are receptive to this way of development and implementing technology where they're involving the frontline so early in the process?
I think we see it emerging. I think it's not happening yet. It's very easy to implement and go towards the shining objects and implement agentic AI and AI, and then think about let's move fast, because involving humans early and often, I think that's going to be the key. And that's not happening enough. And I think that's the great unlock that we have to see in the next 5 to 10 years to really see the benefits of these AI and generative AI and agentic AI technologies for landside logistics. And I think that's where we are seeing it in some pockets, but not nearly enough.
And as we kind of wrap things up, what is the one takeaway?
It's people and technology working together in this notion of rewired end to end. That for me is a big takeaway. I think that has to be done thoughtfully, comprehensively. At the end of the day, logistics will never be 100% automated.
Companies have to master and figure out the human to agent operating model. And we mentioned that automation is not just going to happen on the logistics company. It's going to happen on the customer side, on the recipient as well. So I think that's the big takeaway, that human to agent operating model is going to be the big unlock for industry, for especially our industry in landside logistics.
We really appreciate both Sal and Ali for sharing your time and your insights. It was, really eye-opening and very interesting for us to listen to. So thank you very much.
I always learn something new on these.
Yeah.
So thank you both. And of course, we also want to thank our listeners for joining us. You can find Beyond the Box on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.